What the hell do you mean I need a compass to turn my Land Raider? Rogue Trader was a wild time. GW was experimenting with several different things, from vast numbers of Xenos like the Pisceans and vampires, to the slow implementation of chaos. The game even had some RPG qualities to it, from bespoke character creation to needing a DM to balance the game out for either side. But one of the more peculiar things that GW seemed to want to implement was some sort of realism. You know, in this weird universe of demons, magic and mushrooms whom star actual literal orcs and goblins. And one of the ways that GW wanted to implement this is with the vehicle turn radius ratio. Now, this intro bit is too short for me to get into more detail on that mess. Rest assured, I will get more into detail on the TRR later in this video, but how did vehicles as a whole actually work in Rogue Trader? Let's take a look at the vehicle rules from the core book and the vehicle manual, as well as a few examples of how they worked in the army lists. Before we delve into how vehicles worked in Rogue Trader, let's take a look at how vehicles work in modern 40k. And frankly, it's quite simple. Vehicles are standard units that have the vehicle keyword. They're often a bit more sturdy than most other models, and often have invulnerable saves to depict their sturdier nature, though not always. Most vehicles, when reduced to 0 wounds, explode on a roll of a 6 on the Deadly Demise feature. Functionally, vehicles have no difference from monsters, aside from being more mechanical than biological, a differentiation that becomes more arbitrary as we get into the territory of demon engines. If the model has a transport keyword, it can ferry around as many models as its transport capacity implies, and models can disembark from the unit, having different rules for if the transport moved prior to the disembarkation or not. Aircraft also have different rules, starting in reserves and having to move at vast speeds across the table, firing at other aircraft and doing strafing runs at the models below. Vehicles must make pivot actions if they wish to turn, often being considered a 2-inch reduction from their movement stat for that action, with the exception of smaller models like bikes, which get only a 1-inch reduction, and aircraft, which don't have an actual maximum movement characteristic, instead having a minimum movement of 20 inches. Or at least, that's how pivoting works in 10th. It looks like 11th is changing the pivot rule, or just getting rid of it. In previous editions of 40k, starting in 2nd edition with the data card format and continuing to this day in Horus Heresy, vehicles have armor facings. Now in 2nd edition this was a bit more complicated, as things in 2nd edition tended to be, but the general gist is this. You would roll to hit as normal, but on a successful hit, you would roll for armor penetration, as a d6 plus the strength of the attack. If the score matched the armor facing's toughness, the result was a glancing hit, causing some effect to the crew, and in modern games, plinking off a hull point. A higher result was a penetrating hit, where you rolled on the penetrating hit chart, with a bonus for weapons with AP2 or AP1. Back then, armor penetration meant that the weapon negated armor saves of up to that score. AP2 negated all armor saves, and gave a +1 to penetrating hit rolls, and AP1 did the same, but gave a +2 to penetrating hit rolls. Armorbane also conferred an extra die to armor penetration rolls, though that has changed in Modern Heresy to replacing glancing hits with penetrating hits. Got it? I understand if that was a bit much, but well, things are about to get weird, so strap in. Starting off with the Rogue Trader core rulebook, on page 38 in the combat section, we find rules for vehicles. And after reminding people that while Citadel vehicles did not exist at the moment, they were planning on making them, and several plastic vehicle kits existed out there for aspiring vehicleists. Shut up, that's a word. They do, however, mention this. Large vehicles are almost impossible to manufacture as white metal kits, and, in any case, the cost would be prohibitive. Well, the Proto-Forge world sure showed them. The vehicle stat line is showed here, and oh my god, I have my work cut out for me, haven't I? Right, let's get to it, I guess. The universal stat lines are split into 3 categories, and I'm going to call them Land, Air, and Universal, not the movie studio. The land stats are split into 2, max speed, representing the fastest move possible to make without running the risk of losing control. Yes, apparently it is possible to swerve into the curb in Rogue Trader, who knew? Any vehicle can be driven at a maximum of double the max speed stat, but that would wind up being a rather risky move. ACC/DEC is next and means the vehicle's acceleration and deceleration. This stat indicates the speed at which the vehicle can accelerate and decelerate. A vehicle can decelerate at twice the rate at which they can accelerate. For example, if the stat is 6, your vehicle can accelerate by 6 inches a turn and decelerate by 12. Next, we get to the air stats. Air max speed works the same way as land max speed, down to the vehicle being able to be flown at twice the speed at a risk to the pilot. Minimum speed, however, indicates how slow an aircraft is able to fly without falling out of the sky. Some aircraft can hover, but most cannot. The air acceleration and deceleration stats are the same as for a land vehicle. Okay, now we get to the wacky stuff. The turn radius ratio. A non-hovering vehicle turns by wheeling rather than making precise angular turns. The radius of the wheel always equals the forward speed of the vehicle in inches multiplied by the turn radius ratio. The distance traveled by the vehicle is measured along the inside of the curve. What? I know that sounds like a lot, but I'll get to this later when I show you how vehicles work. The next stat is capacity, meaning the maximum number of human-sized models that can be carried in a vehicle, driver and crew included. Toughness is the same as with anything, showcasing how tough the vehicle is, and compared to the strength of enemy attacks. Damage is the same as wounds on creatures. SV is save. EQ depicts how much equipment the vehicle can carry, and W is how many weapons can be mounted on the vehicle. The score represents the number of basic weapons that can be equipped. Heavier weapons take up more of the score. Next, we're given rules for boarding and disembarking vehicles. The more a vehicle has access points, the more models can get in and out per turn, and this is also dependent on the movement stat of the unit in question. Models with a move of 3.5 inches or more can have 4 units leave per normal-sized exit, but it instructs that the GM would have to make rulings regarding larger and smaller doors. Open-topped vehicles do not restrict the number of models leaving per exit. You can also leave and exit a moving vehicle, but anyone disembarking a vehicle moving faster than 10 inches suffer automatic hits with no save permitted, at a strength of the movement speed -10. Vehicles must have drivers to move, and the driver needs at least one hand to control the vehicle. If the driver is firing a pistol with their offhand, they suffer a -1 to hit penalty. The driver can also utilize the forward-mounted built-in weapons of the vehicle with no penalty, but counting as using both hands to pilot the vehicle, removing their ability to pull out the pistol. I mean, one would assume that a volley from a front-mounted heavy bolter pair would be more effective than a haphazard shot from a las pistol. Troops can fire from open-topped vehicles and through weapon ports and top hatches from closed vehicles. Any that do so from moving vehicles must only shoot at short range, grenades included, but all attacks made that way count as occurring during any point of the vehicle's move. Vehicles can be shot at the way any other models can as well, though speed and size can affect the hit chance. Wound rolls and saves are rolled as normal, and damage is allocated as normal. If the vehicle's damage points are whittled down to 0, the vehicle is destroyed, and anyone inside is killed unless they pass their standard saving throw on a d6, or a possible ejector seat saving roll, if such things are available. Where this becomes more interesting is with the vehicle's special damage chart. Each time the vehicle sustains damage during a turn, the player must roll a d6, and a 6 indicates a problem has occurred. The player must then roll a d10 to see exactly what has occurred, adding +1 for each damage point above 1 for both the initial d6 roll and the following d10 roll. The chart itself has many effects that would be familiar to many Heresy or 2nd edition players. Weapons get jammed, the vehicles go out of control, the vehicle suffers a system failure, or simply blows up right then and there. Upon going out of control, the player must determine the speed and direction changes with a roll of dice. Speed is determined with 2 rolls of d10, one standing for acceleration, the other for deceleration. The combined result shows how the speed changes. A roll of a d6 then determines the direction the vehicle is moving, and you better hope that you roll a 5 or a 6, otherwise, get the compass out. If you are driving over your max speed, your vehicle can go out of control on a roll of a 6. If you are turning at over max speed, that goes up to a 5 or a 6, and if you are out of control on a previous turn, that goes up to 4 to 6. If 2 vehicles collide, the damage suffered is d4 points per 5 inches of the combined speed, plus the opposing vehicle's toughness minus your vehicle's toughness. Colliding into a scenic feature is much the same, with the added point of reference that rocks and other solid objects can be assumed to have a toughness of 10. The same statistic works for running over creatures. Many vehicles also have automatic systems, including auto-drive, which can function like a normal driver, auto-aim, utilizing one mounted weapon and selecting appropriate targets, and auto-fac, or automatic facilities, opening doors, hatches, and operating other equipment. Now, let's showcase how this works with 2 turns for the vehicle and some enemies. I'm using the big lad, the Land Raider. First off, the vehicle needs a pilot, and I'm putting my Tech Marine as the pilot. Also, while the vehicle is armed with a bolter and 2 las cannons as standard, it is also stated that the Land Raider is easily modified and may be variously armed, so I can easily make it so that the Land Raider instead carries 2 las cannons, 2 heavy bolters, which I'm counting as built-in weapons that the pilot can operate, and a single bolter. Is that correct when looking at the stat line? No. Do I care? Also no. Alongside the pilot, I'm putting in 3 Marines to operate the pintle-mounted bolter and the sponson-mounted las cannons, and 3 more to pop out from the top hatch and fire through the firing ports on the sides. This means that, technically, the Land Raider still has 3 more spots open for a commanding officer, medic, or extra Tech Marine. The acceleration rate is 7, the max speed is 20, and the TRR is 1. The toughness is 8, one of the higher ones around that time. Amazingly, the tank only has a save of 5 and 6. But let's start the demonstration. Starting the turn with a move, I accelerate to a 7-inch move. I'm moving straight forward with a squad of Terminators on one side, a Dreadnought on the other, and a squad of Devastators dead ahead. The Land Raider opts to fire 2 bolters and 1 las cannon at the Terminators. However, as I open fire with the las cannon, its firepower is such that it vaporizes every member of the Terminator squad into a pink mist. Only 1 bolter and the twin heavy bolters fire at the Marine squad dead ahead. The bolter is unable to deal a single wound, but the heavy bolters are able to blow away a pair of Marines. On the other side, 1 bolter and las cannon shot is blasted at the Dreadnought, but no shots connect. On their turn, the Havocs fire back. The bolter's strength of only 4 means that they cannot deal a single wound to the Land Raider's toughness 8, but the mildly stronger heavy bolters and crack missile-armed missile launchers are able to take shots at it. The heavy bolters fail to perform, but the missile launchers connect. One crack missile able to blast through the hull and deal D10 damage, dealing a whopping 10 points. This leaves the Land Raider with 20 damage left to chew through. But I was used to the modern game, where the Land Raider has significantly fewer wounds to play with, and assumed that this would be the case here as well, so I removed the Raider from play. Oops. But note, the Land Raider did not get to make saves. The crack grenades, when fired from a missile launcher, have an armor penetration of 6, completely negating the Land Raider's measly 5 to 6 armor score. And yeah, here, armor penetration is basically just a reduction of a certain number from the armor score. Also, I didn't put this into my script, but when I rolled to see if any damage effects were to happen to the vehicle, I rolled a 1. Now, nowhere in the rules does it say this, but I'm going to be laboring whenever I play games under the assumption that a 1 is an automatic failure in any situation, so no special vehicle effects were then rolled for. But since I thought that I'd lost my Raider, I didn't get to show you how the turn radius ratio works. So I recorded an example video. We'll labor under the assumption that my Land Raider is moving at a humble 7 inches a turn. The Land Raider's TRR is 1, meaning we multiply the current speed, 7, with a TRR, 1, getting a TRR of 7. This doesn't sound that bad, but there are some vehicles that have a TRR of 0.5, and the Juggernaut vehicles can have a whopping 7 in their TRR, meaning that at max speeds, you'd have to make an 84-inch radius cycle with your Jugger. Granted, these are massive, city-sized vehicles, but still, holy crap. But back to the video. Where do we use this turn radius data we got? Right here, in this compass. I've not had to use one of these since primary school. So, we put the turn radius ratio into the width of the compass, plop it down so the front point is perpendicular with the inner front side of the vehicle, and go around by about 7 inches, moving the Land Raider until it is perpendicular again with the point of the compass. Actually using this, it's a lot simpler than it looks on paper, but any game that makes me use a compass is a scary one to me. So, that's the Rogue Trader core rulebook, and it's quite a bit. There are also walker rules and aircraft rules, but I think that's for another day. I've made enough overly long videos lately. Let's get to the next bit. 40k Vehicle Manual. This is the first time I've ever looked through this book, so this ought to be interesting. Starting off, we get a summary of the vehicle rules. These have changed quite a bit since the core rulebook, so let's go over these quickly, followed by the stat line for vehicles. Movement works as follows. Vehicles can move at fast, combat, and slow speeds. At fast speeds, you can turn your vehicle by 45 degrees once. At combat speed, you can turn 45 degrees twice, able to combine it into a 90-degree turn when needed. And at slow speeds, you can turn as you like. The effect of the terrain for vehicles is discussed. Tracked vehicles can't move through woods and get stuck in marshes on a roll of a 6 on a d6. They can safely traverse streams and fords, but can't move in deep water. Wheeled vehicles can cross difficult or very difficult ground at slow speeds, but can't move through woods or linear obstacles, and can only cross shallow streams and fords, and no other types of water. Bikes and trikes have the same difficult ground and water limitations as wheeled vehicles, and can't cross linear obstacles, but woods are fair game. Walkers can move unimpeded through all terrain save woods and deep water, but they can move at half rate through woods and even underwater. Walls that reach over the walker's knee will prevent the walker from moving over them, but they can walk through hedges or other such light vegetation. They can enter buildings if the entry holes are big enough for the model to enter and the building can physically accommodate the walker. Skimmers, as you might assume, have no terrain limitations, but their special deal is that at slow speeds they can land. At higher speeds though, they will crash if they try. The rules about embarking and disembarking a moving vehicle are still there, down to the exact strength of the hit the unit takes when hopping on or off at higher speeds. This time though, there's a handy chart. Vehicle collisions, on the other hand, have been streamlined to this simple table. Out of control rules have been simplified to only using standard d6s. You move 2d6 inches, but the turning is still the same. You still get a handy chart. Skimmers get an extra roll to see if they do a nosedive. Bikes can do skid turns, and to do so they must make skid tests. Skid turns are done at combat speed or fast speed and require a roll of d6, the speed determining how easy it is to pass the skid test. At combat speeds you have a 50-50 chance of passing the skid test. At fast speed, you make it 1 pip harder and have a chance of crashing. And here we get to more familiar ground. The hit and damage procedure is changed. Hits are rolled very different though. You first place a grid over the vehicle's targeting diagram, rolling 2d6 on the horizontal axis and the vertical axis to determine where your shot lands, and you can move this vertically and horizontally closer to the grid's crosshair by the amount of your target shift score. What's a target shift score? Simply a combination of your ballistic skill and any hit modifiers. However, here's where it gets interesting. You must roll for vehicle penetration. This is done with a d6 to which you add your weapon's strength and damage dice. If you manage to score equal to or higher than the armor value of the target area, you have scored a wound and roll on the armor penetration table. Now, as is tradition in Rogue Trader, this is significantly more complex than the AP tables you see in later editions and Heresy, but it is still the grandpappy of where we are now. After this, we're given some vehicle datafaxes, showcasing the statistics of the different vehicles, starting with the humble Rhino. So we should too. Ignore the fact that this is a Horus Heresy Rhino and not an era-appropriate one. Much to my shame, I don't have a Rogue Trader Rhino. The Rhino costs a mere pittance of 25 points and comes equipped with twin bolters with a 360-degree field of fire and a smoke launcher for obscuring the area. The crew is 1 driver and 1 gunner, and it has a transport capacity of 10. The slow speed is 8, combat speed is 18, and fast speed is 25. The Rhino's armor facings are shown, or more accurately, the armor placements. On the front, these bits get an extra pip of armor, and from the back they're 1 weaker. We then get the Rhino damage tables, depending on exactly where you hit the Rhino. And yeah, this is how it is for pretty much everything. My favorite bits from this is that Space Marine and Imperial Guard land speeders have different stats, Orc battle wagons are able to carry as many Orc models as you can physically shove on the model, 2 vehicles that, to my knowledge, only showed up in Epic as miniatures, the Scorcher and the Gob Smasher, though models for these were made for 40k by Epicast, and the fact that Juggernauts are considered vehicles. Also, Blood Slaughterers are here. This makes me happy. Now, let's see how this actually works, using my Blood Slaughterer and Land Raider. Let's start with the Land Raider's turn. The Land Raider moves at combat speed, giving it a 14-inch move and 2 45-degree turns. It moves as such, turning twice. Since it made a combat speed move, it can still shoot. It is now facing the side of the Blood Slaughterer and fires its twin heavy bolters and single las cannon at the Slaughterer. Starting with the cannon, and again, it's a bit of an overkill. And again, it's a bit of an overkill to be shooting the heaviest weapon first. The scores I get are a 7, so pretty much dead center of the grid, and a 3. With the crewman having a ballistic skill of 4, I'm able to shift the target from the engine up to the dead center, the head. When I roll for armor penetration, the target score is a 17. The las cannon's strength is 9, and its damage score is a 2d6. As such, with a combo of d6 plus weapon strength plus damage dice, the las cannon's AP is 9 plus 3d6. I roll up a pair of 3s and a 2, an 8, making it an exact 17 on the dice, a successful penetration. I then roll a d6 on the damage table for the head and I get a 5. The hit drills the slaughterer neatly between the eyes, killing it instantly. The machine spirit grinds to a halt and may not move or attack for the rest of the battle. Yeah, las cannons are scary. I played another round, this time with the slaughterer getting a turn. As it is within charge range and thus gaining frenzy, the slaughterer charges at once into combat. However, it only has a power axe of strength 6 and damage 1 to deal damage. Rolling again on the grid, I get a 6 and an 11, meaning a track hit. Technically there are no rules specifying how you deal damage to vehicles in melee combat, but I'm assuming it works the same, but subbing the ballistic skill for weapon skill. I opt to stay put, as all other options would be too tough for the power axe to hit. However, on the penetration, I fail to even dent the Land Raider's tracks. Maybe hitting the weapon on the side with a toughness of 10 would have been even better, but c'est la vie. Now, let's take a look at how the vehicles were handled in different 40k publications. We'll start with the Book of the Astronomicon, and honestly, this all feels very familiar. Going down to the army list, the White Scars list supports options, includes Bullock jet cycles, land speeders, Hellfire Land Raiders, grav attacks, Black Shadow combinations, and dreadnoughts. Lugup's Drop Legion gets pilfered Imperial jet bikes and land speeders, and their own dreadnoughts, Black Shadows, and battle buggies. Much like with all other army lists you might find in later editions, vehicles are treated as units in their own rights. But that would not remain for too long. In the same year's Warhammer 40,000 compendium, vehicles have already shifted to an equipment option. Guard getting bikes and attack bikes, jet bikes, land speeders, grav attacks, rhinos, land raiders and predators, with all the latter ones, the ones that aren't bikes, needing either Mechanicus priests or servitors as their custodians. The only exception is the Sentinel, which functions like a normal unit in a vehicle brought as a unit. And yes, the Sentinel has a TRR. It is 0.5. Squats seem to have the more modern vehicles as units mentality, at least partially, bike squads and trike weapon teams being able to be taken as units, but rhinos and land raiders are still taken as equipment, apparently not needing custodians for these. Harlequins don't have vehicles of their own, but are able to use any vehicles from other lists, with a caveat of that vehicle breaking down on occasion. And with a vehicle manual, the idea seems to be that you take the vehicles your army list is able to normally use, and use them as the vehicle manual stipulates. Marines and Guardsmen can take Predators, provided you have the Tech Marines or Tech Priests. Whirlwinds and Land Raiders too. The Dreadnought has been made into a specifically Space Marine Dreadnought, while the Guard gets Sentinels. Marines and Guardsmen get their own land speeders. Eldar can take Eldar jetbikes and Dreadnoughts as well as Warwalkers. Orcs can take Battle Wagons, Gobsmashers, Scorchers, Dreadnoughts of both the normal and super heavy varieties, probably considered Killer Cans and Death Dreads in modern 40k. War Tracks, War Buggies, War Bikes and Knob Bikes. Squats can take bikes, Guild Trikes and Exo-Armored Trikes, and if you want to play Chaos, you can play any vehicle in a normal Space Marine army, with the addition of Juggernauts of Khorne, Blood Slaughterers, and replacing the Imperial Dreadnought with a Chaos Dreadnought. After this book was released, the next releases that would deal with vehicles would be the second edition's Codex Army Lists and Codex Imperialis, and that means that today's tale must come to a close. Vehicles have been handled really differently from edition to edition, and this video didn't even touch on the aerial vehicles that much, but that's a whole different can of worms to dig into. Flyers have been handled really differently edition to edition, and suffice it to say, that's a topic for a different video. But what have we learned from this story? Well, for one, managing how vehicles work in 40k is and has been a bit of a complicated issue. Changes were inevitable, but it's evident that GW didn't particularly know how to handle the matter even back then, hence the two very different vehicle systems in Rogue Trader. And for another, if you are a game designer and want to make a fun war game, don't make it so that your players have to have a compass handy! Shish. Thank you so much for watching this video. This one I wasn't planning on doing originally, but I realized I hadn't even looked at the vehicle manual once, so thought it appropriate to make this video to educate myself and you lot as well. If you made it this far, why not let me know what your favorite vehicle system is in tabletop games in general, or just what 40k vehicle is your favorite. I'm actually a bit torn between the Decimator and the Rogue Trader Land Raider. But anywho, if you liked the video, consider leaving a like, maybe even subscribing if this video really touched you in places you'd rather not share with the words, and share this video with your friends if they also hate having to even own a compass. Thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!